Well, welcome. We are here in the middle of the silly season, the season where the people who have an opinion and care enough to step up and help step forward. As always, I'll never ask you to vote for any specific candidate, but I'll beg you to vote and to become an educated voter. Get to know each of the candidates. There's forums. Citizens from Milford has forums. There's Senior Center forums. There's this show. There's the Trib Show. There's everything available to learn who you should vote for, who you believe will best represent you. Tonight we have one of those special people, somebody who's willing to help Milford, but somebody who's been around Milford a little while.
60 years.
Why don't we start with an introduction?
All right. Most people know me as Ted. My legal name is John DePaolo. But almost 60 years ago, they said we're going to call me Ted because my middle name was Edward. But no, born and raised in Milford, been here forever. Did a 35-year career with the fire department as an EMT firefighter. Worked in the community or Main Street, basically, for over 40 years. Prior to being on the fire department to after being retired, Main Street has always been my playground. I mean, other than growing up on Congress Street, Main Street's been it for 40 years.
Well, for 30 years you were Ted. Then the last 30 years you were Marissa's father.
Marissa and Megan's father.
And Megan.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? That's still true today. I can go someplace and they'll be like, "Oh, you're Marissa or Megan's dad." Yes, I am. And that's very nice because I'm recognized as my daughter's father. But it's also recognizable because for 12 years I coached in the community, whether it was soccer or softball. And, you know, I mean, we did the Santa Parade for 33 years. So, I mean, the only thing longer than that was my marriage to my wife, but she's a Milfordian, and she's put up with the hectic Decembers and Novembers and the sports schedule. The only thing that was sacred was the first week in August. We had to go away for family vacation because we had to come back for soccer or the season or school or my wife going back to work as a teacher. But other than that, the first week in August, we always went away. Other than that, we've been here 51 weeks a year.
I was just saying, besides that, we all played hockey together.
Yes, we did. We had a good time. And it was the best exercise of our life. We were probably in the best shape of our life back then.
Well, it was something that you knew you had to show up.
Yeah, nobody can glide.
No, and you were there, and Pearlie was there in goal, and
yeah, JP, yes, and Murph and Hogs and all those guys. You know what? The community that Milford has, that's why we're still here today. I mean, when we moved up off of Ivy Lane 23 years ago, we left our home on Main Street. We had a two-family, and we thought about, you know, a lot of the people I grew up with and my wife grew up with moved to Mendon, Upton, Uxbridge, Millville, Blackstone. We wanted to stay in Milford. We were very, very adapt to what Milford offered and what Milford could give to us kids as students, and just the whole idea of that's home. And that's, you know, and I grew up, as you know, Al, I grew up with instilled in me that you have to give back in the community that you live in. And that's one of the reasons I'm running for planning board, is because I no longer coach. I no longer do the Santa Parade. I no longer work at the fire station. I no longer have that schedule. So basically, I'm retired. I work from home a little part-time thing. I do a lot of the cooking. I do a lot of the running around with my mother-in-law, my sister, and family. But I'm in Milford 24/7. And it's different now when there's no bells ringing or there's no tone going off that says, "Hey."
You don't have to run out and save somebody's life.
Right. You know, and it's different. I feel like I'm missing something. And that's why, like I said, this is my third year pulling nomination papers, but this is the first year that I've moved forward and gone into the campaign for the election.
Well, let's start. Ted, I start and end the show with the same question. I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, I'm one of those guys who's always given 110% to my community. Whether it be 1976, we had the bicentennial parade, and Rosie Ford had me on the top of that cake, cutting all the cake pieces up on Main Street in front of Nealon's Pharmacy. And it goes back to just being brought up that you always contribute to the community, and that's something I've always done. We go out there and you look around. I mean, Milford's one of those communities that it has grown in the last 40 years, leaps and bounds. But I still walk down Main Street, or I still take the dogs for a walk, and I still run into people that I grew up with, or my family grew up with, or somebody that I know in the community, and they're like, oh, you still live in town? Yeah, I wouldn't live anywhere else. So I have my roots in the community, but I also have the ability to say that I've been on every street, every road, and every cart path because of brush fires in the community. I know the community very well, and I'm going to be honest and tell you, I wouldn't live anywhere else.
No matter how far you go away, that gravitational pull.
It's true.
Brings
you know,
you back.
I mean, we spoke about it a few years ago, but Milford is home, and it offers an awful lot to the community and the citizens in the community, and that's something I want to keep going in the direction that we're in. We don't need a city, or we don't need a small city. We need that small town feel, even though we've grown leaps and bounds, but we still need the ability to say, hey, you know what, that's our career. You know what, we need to make sure that the hospital, the area of business and commercial and industrial, and the residential, and the schools, and everything that comes with that is all working best for the citizens. And that's what I want to do.
So now, if somebody comes up to you and says, what is a planning board? How do you answer that?
Well, this is probably my 5th or 6th year that I've looked into this position, and I've done a little research, and the planning board basically gets the information or the particulars from the town planner, Larry Duncan, or from Mike Dean, the town engineer, and we have to decipher that if this building or this subdivision or this building community is legal, and if it's in the right jurisdiction. There's 12 zones in Milford that are zoned for each individual business, residential, multifamily, industrial, commercial, and people don't realize there's 12 different aspects of that. So you have to realize that if you want to build a home and you want to be in a nice neighborhood, or you want to build a subdivision, you don't want, a fast food joint next to your place. So the planning board is given the information from the town planner and the town engineer, and we decipher if it's suitable for that land or that parcel of land with the information we're given and with the zoning that is already into the town.
What happens if you think the zoning isn't right?
Well, then there's an amendment, or there's a special permit, or there is a, what they call, you would bring it before the zoning board, and the zoning board would decide if the planning board has done due diligence and if it fits right for where that parcel of land is.
So now, as you look out, your vision of Milford, what would you say your vision of Milford is?
It has grown so much. When I first became a firefighter in '84, we were doing 121 calls a month.
A month?
A month. Last 2021, last year, they were averaging 513 calls a month. So, they talk about congestion, they talk about the schools, overpopulation, everything. The town has grown in leaps and bounds, like I said, but we've still got that small town feel. So we need to make sure that we cover all our bases and make sure everybody gets what is duly needed or what is duly required for where they are, whether it be a a multifamily, an apartment complex, a condo, a single family, or if they're a businessman in the community and they own a property. So it's changed, but it's still the same.
Now, we talk about a plan. Is there an overall plan?
We have a comprehensive plan, which I voted for in 2003 at the town meeting. It expires in 2023. It's a 20-year plan, and it has to do with subsidized housing. It has to do with the goals set forth by the people who run the community. You know, you have to do this, this, and this in the 20 years. What I would like to see done is let's address that at 10 years, and then let's address it 5 years later, and let's address it 3 years after that, and then 1 year before. Because from what I'm hearing, it's been 19 years, and they're now putting a committee together for this to expire next year, when I think it should have been done a few years ago.
Can they do it that quickly?
I don't know. When I got on the planning board, I would like to say we do a 20-year plan, but we address it every 5 years, 10 years interval. We step up, and then when you get closer to the end, you do every 3 or every 1, so that you're not jumped in at once and everyone's got to, throw the gear on and get it done.
Yeah, I can't imagine waiting 20 years. I mean, think about when we were kids. If somebody said there'd be a house, well, Whitewood didn't exist, but if somebody said there'd be a house going for $900,000.
It's amazing. It really is. My grandfather built over 400 homes off Congress Street. My mom was a Kellett, and off of Hale Ave, Lavoie Ave, Walker Ave, Kellett Drive, Congress Terrace, all of that area up until the high school was built, where you went with the 74 year of graduation. That was my grandpa's land, and he passed away in the late 60s, and the town approached my uncle and my mom and a few of the people and said, that would be a great place for a school. And I mean, that was my playground. I spent more time in the Godfrey Brook than I did on the street. And that's the truth. We had a great time. And Milford's still that community where you can have a hometown feel, a small town feel, and still achieve big town goals. And that's basically why people draw to Milford. If you look at, we got 2 exits off 495. Yeah, we're 30 miles from Boston, we're 30 miles from Worcester, we're 30 miles from Providence. Back when I was a kid, and you also, it was known as the Tri-Town, because you had Providence, Worcester, and Boston, and right in the middle was Milford. So people could work in Boston, Providence, or Worcester, and have a bedroom community like Milford with all of, you have excellent services. And I'm not just saying that because I was a firefighter for 35 years. But when you pick up the phone, somebody answers the phone, and then they show up. Whether it be snow with Scotty Crisafulli and those guys, or whether it be 911 with the fire and police, or whether it be schools, or whether it be sewer, parks. Not every community has that ability.
Well, how do you see the planning board helping Milford to be what you think it should be?
I believe that the planning board has done a very good job over the last 40 years that I have been on Main Street. And I feel that the future is very vital to the community and to the citizens who are living here. And I think the planning board, we're not the answer to all questions. That can be the town planner or the town engineer or the zoning board or the conservation commission, or any aspects of these boards all come together. And if it's not good for the community, then it's not going to pass, because it has to fit the parcel of land. And if it doesn't meet the qualifications or the regulations or the zoning, then it's not going to happen unless you get a special permit. And I got to be honest with you, Milford has an awful lot of land that is still viable, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, anything where you can spread the wings and put a building, we need to be diligent in our commitment to the community and to the citizens to make sure that's the right piece that goes in that parcel of land.
Well, that's good to hear, because I get the impression that there's no land left to develop in Milford.
You know, I've heard that before, but 35 years, every spring, summer, and fall, I was a billy goat fighting brush fires. And I'll be honest with you, there's an awful lot of land. I mean, right behind Station 2 on Birch Street, that was supposedly ledged. They were never going to build. They're putting 200 apartments in there. Down off of 85 on Deer Street, which is down behind Restaurant Depot, they have 400 apartments down there. There's 600 apartments that will be fully occupied by December 1st. That is transportation, that's traffic, that's schools, that's fire and police, that's sewer, that's water. Those are things that all come into play. And those were always the areas of town that nobody would ever develop. Well, land's getting tight. And as you know, more people are coming to the suburbs from the cities, so they have their own piece of Mother Earth.
Oh, it was the same thing with Fortune Boulevard. Nobody
Yes.
will ever develop Fortune Boulevard.
And look at it today. It is a mecca of business. And my brother-in-law family owned parcel of that land on East Main Street, the Paghetti family. And they never thought anybody would propose a purchase. And Mr. Fafford came into town. He said, I want to go from here to there. And somebody said, there's an awful lot of ledge in there. That's all right. He's known as Ledge Man for a reason, Al. It's just, you don't, I mean, look at the mine that's down on East Main Street. They have basically blasted and dug out all of that land. And my theory behind all that, when they're done, is that's a beautiful place for an 18-hole golf course. And I haven't golfed in years, but I think it's next to the 495. I mean, whether you go to Bellingham, there's a golf course next to 495. Go to Hopkinton, there's a golf course next to 495 in Mass Pike. Why can't we have one in Milford? I mean, the land has been sitting there idle, because on the backside is Vietnam from 85. And I can honestly tell you that a few years back, more than I want to remember, but we spent 86 days fighting brush fires.
Wow.
In the community of Milford on land that was never supposed to be developed. And some of that land has been developed, but a lot of that land is still viable and available.
Well, I mean, we've called the fire department a number of times to the old area we used to call the UTurn.
I heard of that place.
Only read about it.
Yeah.
Never went there.
Actually, there was a few places in town back in the day, and nobody ever thought they'd be developed, and they're developed in the neighborhoods or their industrial parks or their businesses or their residential. Nobody ever thought back in our time that it would ever be developed.
So somebody comes up to you and says, I want to put up a new subdivision. What does the planning board use for criteria to decide should we support it or not?
Well, every individual zoning community or zoning parcel is under guidelines that developed probably in the 70s, and they've been updated over the years, but we have to follow the guidelines that is given to us, and we have to adhere to certain regulations. The runoff of the water from rain and snowmelt, right now with the Charles River Watershed Association looking for Milford, Franklin, and Bellingham to be the starters of the phosphorus safe. They don't want that water runoff to go into the Charles River. So a lot more has been projected as far as what can be done. And I mean, long before I ever came on to thinking about running for planning board, other people have set the guidelines, and we just have to follow the guidelines.
Now, TIFs tend to be controversial in towns. What are your feelings on TIFs? Well, first of all, what is a TIF, and then what are your feelings?
TIF is basically the state EPA explaining to the communities throughout the Commonwealth that rainwater and runoff need to be addressed. And I don't know if you recall, Sacred Heart Church a few years ago renovated their parking lot. And they had to go through a process because of their proximity to the Charles River where they had to put baffles underground underneath the parking lot so that the rainwater and the snowmelt would be cleaned and then it would be slowly released into the drainage or the storm drains and eventually get into the Charles River watershed. And that's, the TIFs are trying to protect the environment, trying to protect anything that has to do with water or air. And those are very vital commodities.
How about the economic TIFs when we give tax incentives to companies?
I know of a few that have gone on for 10 years, and that's an awful long time that the town doesn't have a tax base from that property. And I think we could do a little better as far as, you know, and I don't want to point out any commercial areas or any areas where they've exceeded their time limit and then that building's empty now, or that building is vacant, or that building has changed hands and they still have a tax benefit. The community's still giving services. We're still giving water and sewer, fire and police. Everything that plowing and sanding and all of this stuff comes into play. So you have to remember that you need a reserve account or a bank account or a substantial amount of money so that, God forbid, something happens, we have to rebuild a drainage system or a retention pond or something like that in the neighborhood that we're talking about. That money needs to be readily available. As you know, being on the FinCom, funds are not just falling out of the air. I mean, as much as some people think, oh, Milford's got a lot of money, Milford over the years has been very, very concerned about the funds and about the expenditures that we use these funds for.
So now, you get special projects like the 40Bs and all. How does the planning board get involved there? Because the impression is they get to come in and do what they want.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people believe that. But the state actually oversees 40Bs in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'm not saying the planning board, the zoning board, and the conservation board and all that, hands are tied. They have to meet certain requirements, which they have to all meet. And it's a benefit to the community to have 40Bs in a way, but the state guideline is they want 10% of low-income housing. Milford has always been around 7.5, maybe 7, 8, maybe 8%. No community in Massachusetts has ever got to 10.
I was going to say, is any town qualified?
No. Brockton would be the closest, but they're still around 9.2%. So nobody's ever gotten to 10%.
That's why I always wonder, is it an achievable goal?
Well, the comprehensive plan that we did in 2003 at the town meeting states that it's a goal every year, but you don't make that goal and then get discouraged. You try to get it the next year, or you try to get it 2 years later. You know, and there's things along the way that are obstacles. I mean, 20 years ago when this comprehensive plan was made in 2003, the economy crashed in 2007, 8, and 9. So you could have done anything you wanted, as you said earlier. Right now, Milford has $900,000 homes. So yeah, in those 12 years since 2008 or 10, things have gotten a lot better. So can we achieve more goals? I believe we can.
What do you think would be the biggest challenge you'd face being a member of the planning board?
One of the things that I have looked at is on Main Street, being downtown for 40 years, is above the first floor, the second and third floors of residential, commercial, there's that aspect that we need to put residential in. Not necessarily, because if you look at, and I'm only using this as a comparison, is Craft Roots Brewery can't go on Main Street. It can't go on Route 140. It can't go anywhere but industrial commercial. Well, if somebody's going to spend $500,000 to invest in a company, buy VATs, invest in their next 3 years, because it's a 3-year plan with most commercial properties, you have to give them a little bit more help. I mean, for a long time, Main Street had a lot of vacancy. Right now, everything above second and third floor, 38% is vacant.
Wow.
And that, the landlords are affected by that. You know, and everyone says, oh, you got to worry about this and that. You know what? You have to take care of the tax base. And as you know, Milford has 2 taxes, residential, commercial, industrial. If somebody's not able to make their mortgage or pay their taxes or something, how long is it going to be before that whole storefront or whole building is vacant? And then the town suffers. So if we can help people along, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, in any way, I think we should be doing that.
It'd be fun to keep going, but we're hitting that time. Teddy, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, I believe I've always given 110% to the community, whether it be in my professional life or my personal life. I have always strived to make sure that Milford is the community that my family grew up in and my family now lives in. And I want people to realize that in Milford, it's always an A+. A+ community, and everything we do here is A+.
Thank you. And as always, I want to thank our 6 loyal viewers who are watching. It's too easy today to have an opinion and not be willing to back it up. To all the candidates, I tip my hat to you, Teddy, for being one of the people who sits there and says, Coach, put me in. Not just let me yell from the sidelines, but let me get involved. I mean, let me make this little town of ours that's grown up a little bit better and make it someplace where now our grandkids, you know, want to live in. So as always, thank you for joining. I'm begging you, get out and vote. Pick somebody that you believe and vote. So may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life